All right, here we go. So, welcome to everyone on the chat. Looks like my levels are good. So let's see what we can do here. This is the first in a number of Adobe Animate focused items for this month, right? So we're gonna have some introductory items around Animate and how to use Animate, how to animate with it in different ways for the next 4 weeks, including this one. November is Animate Introductory month, at least for me on my channel here. So let's get started. So today we're looking at specifically frame by frame animation and how to do that inside of Animate. So when you first open Animate, if you've never used it before, you've got some kind of quick start presets right here, very similar to Photoshop, Illustrator, and so forth. I usually click the Create New button, but you can also choose more presets. Either one is going to get you into the new document dialog here. And generally, if you're doing frame by frame stuff, you're probably going to be looking at the character animation category. And you can see here we have a standard 640 by 480, HD, which is your 1280 by 720, 16 by 9 kind of thing, and then also full HD and even 4K. So you can produce content that is very very high res if you want to. I'm gonna stick with HD 1280 by 720. That usually works pretty good. And let's change the frame rate to 24 frames per second. Now you'll notice the platform type down here. You can choose between ActionScript 3.0 or Html5 Canvas. The differences here is ActionScript 3.0 doesn't mean you have to do any code at all, especially since we're just doing a little bit of frame by frame animation. What it means is that it's going to use the native capabilities of Animate in order to allow you to create your animations, produce your animations, whatever you're doing. If you choose HTML5 Canvas, there are going to be some limitations on what you can actually do inside of the application. So I would suggest if you're doing any sort of animation that you're going to output to After Effects or as video or as an animated GIF or something like that, I would say just keep it on the native platform inside of Animate, which is ActionScript 3.0. So I'm gonna hit create, and there we go. Now we've got a nice big stage, and let's go ahead and fit in window here. This little zoom lets you dial in specific numbers if you want, but I like to usually just choose fit in window for most of my stuff, because that way, if I resize my timeline, the stage is gonna resize along with it, which is really nice. All right, so let's change, well, I'm just gonna make the stage color a little less bright, because honestly, it's like blinding with that white color. Let's make it a little blue too. Get a little blue tint, take it down to a little bit of a gray. Yeah, that's more pleasant, right? All right. So as we're getting going, let me know in the chat how you're doing. I like to keep an eye on that and chat with people as I go through these streams. Let's save this too. I'm gonna choose save from my file menu. We'll just save it inside of our downloads folder here. FBF for frame by frame. Right on. Moving some windows around here. Okay, so now we've got it ready to go. And it's time to actually do some animation. Frame by frame animation is kind of like the most straightforward type of animation you can do inside of Animate. And it's also the most time consuming because you do have to create it frame by frame. So a couple of fundamental concepts here. If we look in our document properties, we can see that our FPS value right here is 24. That means that every second of content, you can see the 1 second marker right here. Every second is going to be composed of 24 individual frames, which means if you're doing frame by frame animation, to create 1 second's worth of motion, you do need to draw out that content or adjust it in some way over 24 individual frames. Now you can skip frames too. You don't have to do every single frame. You could always do every other frame or something. So we'll have a look at that. So let's think about what we want to have happen here. I'm just going to do something really simple where like a little ball comes in, bounces off the floor, bounces away somewhere else, right? It's one of the most introductory things you can do, no matter what kind of tweening or frame by frame or motion you're actually doing inside of something like Animate. And for this, I'm going to use the Fluid Brush tool. And Fluid Brush, as you can see up here, can take advantage of the velocity, of the pressure sensitivity, because I am using a Wacom tablet here, an Intuos. So for Fluid Brush, we can set the size, the stabilizer, curve smoothing, roundness, angle, taper, velocity, pressure, and all sorts of additional stuff. So before I get going, and I do this in Fresco too, I like to, ooh, that's way too big. Yeah, let's take that down a bit. Yeah, that's better. I like to go ahead and test my brush settings to make sure that they're to my liking. I don't want it too thick, but I don't want it too thin either. And the thing is, because this is pressure sensitive, you know, if I just sort of have a very light touch, we get that sort of thing. And if I really press down, it gets fatter and fatter as we go. And you can make adjustments to the influence of that pressure sensitivity here too. So let's see, we've got our stabilizer. Let's take curve smoothing up a bit. That's going to help smooth out our strokes. They won't be as jaggy. All right, I'm gonna do a Command A to select all the test strokes I just did and delete them. I think I'm ready to go now with my brush. And you can always save your brush settings as a preset. If you're doing frame by frame stuff, you probably want to find brush settings that work for you and save them off. So I just saved this off as a preset here. You can see it's just 18 is how it labels it. But we can always just go ahead and click that to load up that preset again. All right, so our little ball is gonna come in from this direction. So I'm actually gonna go out to like frame 5 and insert a keyframe. Keyframes are where you actually draw content inside of Animate. So here I want it to start shooting in from there. So there's a little ball. And then if I scrub, we can see it shows up right there. Let's go 2 frames over. And as you can see, creating a new keyframe, what it's done is it's gone through and duplicated the content in my previous keyframe, which isn't exactly something that I want. So I'm gonna undo that with a Control Z. Now there's this feature inside of here, if we use the little drop down, to auto keyframe. And if I turn that on, you can see when I choose any of these frames here, I get this little blue dot, which signifies that if I go ahead and draw over a little bit here, what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead and draw in additional content, and it's going to automatically insert that keyframe. However, for something like this, I actually want to insert a blank keyframe because I don't want the previous frames to show up on the current frame. That would look silly. It would look like there's more than one ball floating across the screen, right? We don't want that. So what I do want is to still be able to have a reference, right, to this previous frame right here on frame 5. So I want to know where that is, the size of it, so that I can properly create my next frame. And that's where onion skinning comes in. Onion skinning can be used when you're tweening. It can be used for all sorts of different things, but it's really, really useful for what we're doing today, which is frame by frame animation. So let's go ahead and turn on our onion skins. We can find that right here. And you can even go to advanced settings here to figure out exactly how you want the onion skin to look. We can see here that we are using a range right now, the previous 2 frames and the next 2 frames. So we could change this to be something like 3 frames, 4 frames, whatever we might want. And setting it as 0 for some reason. Come on, Adobe. There we go. So there we go. Previous and next, 3 and 3. Wow, this one's messed up. There we go. Now they're 3 and 3. So I got my range here. You can choose to do only outlines, as you can see here, or you can do sort of like a full view. And then we have our starting opacity. So this determines frames that are farthest away from here will get a certain opacity. Frames that are closer to our current frame will get another, an increase in opacity. And we've got our decrease by 10% with each frame. So let's go ahead and just keep these settings. You can see down here we do have these markers. We can always move those too. But now I'm at frame 7, and I just want to make this guy a little bigger. And over there. So now we actually do have a bit of motion. If I turn onion skinning off, we can see the little ball comes in, and he's going to travel in this trajectory here. And actually, let's go ahead and add sort of our ground plane. And I'm just going to make that, oops, that's a little too long. This is going to be our ground right here. That's what the ball is going to hit and bounce off of. Let's lock that down so I don't mess with it anymore. And we're going to shift that over there. So the ground is always present, right? And let's go ahead and add in frames up to there. And now I can move the playhead all across here. So this layer 1 I'm going to rename to ball, because that's where our ball lives. And we're ready to kind of continue on. So I'm going to go over here to the next couple frames and insert a blank keyframe again. And let's turn our onion skinning back on so I can see the previous frames. So we can see how this looks right here. These are our constraints for our frames. So I'm going to do another one here. And I want this to speed up a bit as it gets closer. So I can make it like that. And this is the process, right? And I am not, as a warning, you know, this kind of animation actually is not something I do very often at all. And I'm doing it rather quickly too. So don't expect a masterpiece out of this. All right, so here we get towards the bottom. And if we look, we can see how that motion is kind of working, right? So if I get towards the bottom here, now maybe I want to have a little more detail. So maybe like back here, like who cares about, you know, the amount of detail? It's way up there, doesn't really matter that much. But down below here, I want to start going actually frame by frame, each and every single frame. So I'm gonna pop in a keyframe right there. And here I gotta make a decision. It's like, well, let's have it kind of squishy right here. And then right here, I want it to be squishier and flatter. Maybe just shift and over a little bit like this before it comes back up. Then as it comes back up, we'll collect it a little more as a more of a circular shape, right? And then it'll start jumping off here. Now, as it hits, we could always put in some additional content here, like some little like dust marks or something, but we should do that in a separate layer probably if we do decide to do something like that. So again, welcome everyone who's just joining. Just doing some basics in Animate today. So this will be useful for people who want to get into Animate, just like a step at a time. So over November, we're going to go over a number of different ways of animating content inside of Animate using different methods. So at this point, I'm going to go back to spacing it by 2. And this is how you do it. Obviously, this is a very simple version of this. But you can imagine, yeah, I don't even need to put anything else on there. It's gone. It's off the screen. So let's fill in, well, you don't even need to do that because it's there. So now we can see how this is working, right? Pretty good. Pretty simple. So aside from onion skinning, if we want to actually preview this, we can set on our looping here and change our loop markers to extend across the entire screen, and then play it back. All right, so you can see one of the things that is really nice about frame by frame animation, right, is that you do have total manual control over every stroke. So if you were using something a little bit better than an Intuos here, you'd probably be able to, you know, really animate some things very coolly. But notice here too, how the lines change and squiggle, because they're all different. That's like a feeling you get with frame by frame animation that you don't really get in some of the other animation formats inside of Animate, like a motion tween, a shape tween, a classic tween, things like that. All right. Let's go ahead and pause this. And you can always scrub it too. So one of the nice things about having it as an ActionScript 3.0 native document in Animate too, is you've got up here this little test movie button. And if I click that, it's going to actually render it for me right here. Now, if we wanted this to be a little faster, there are ways of doing that. We could actually scale our spans and then change the FPS. So like if I wanted it to be like 30 FPS instead of 24, what that's gonna do once I hit enter, you can see it's actually made it, it's extended those frames, right? Because it's enlarged it. And now it's going to look a bit different. We could also, let's undo that. We could also take it down to something like, 12 frames per second. And when that happens, it really squishes everything down. You can see even those keyframes with spacings of 2, I have now, they've all become 1. They've been squished down, right? Let's undo that again, because I want it to be 24 frames per second. And you'll notice that as it changes, the actual second marks change as well. So when I had it at 12, the 1 second marker was there, and so forth. So let's see here. I've got that done. Let's go ahead and add some of those bits and pieces on impact. So when it hits, we want it to kick up a little bit of dust or something over here. And then when it launches again, kick some dust that way. That's gonna help sell the effect, right? The physicality of this motion. So let's see, it hits right there. So I'm gonna create a new layer and call this dust for lack of a better term. Then again, just add in a blank keyframe right there. And choosing my fluid brush again, let's take that down to like 6. So you can see here over these 3 frames, I'm just starting out at 3 at the biggest point of impact, and then reducing to 2, and then to 1. Here, I'm not gonna have anything. So I'm gonna have a blank frame. Then here I'm gonna do the inverse. So insert a keyframe, just do a little one. And then here, something like that. Then of course, you can sort of peter out, right? And then disappear. So let's have a look at that. Now you can notice too in our frame by frame animation here, you know, you might want to like redo some of these. Like this guy, that doesn't look all that great. He's kind of open, you know. So what you can always do is either erase what you drew, or just oops, no. Make sure you have the right layer selected. You want to go ahead and maybe fill this in, right? So you could make adjustments to the ball or whatever this thing is as it goes through. I'm gonna load up my brush that I had saved. Yeah, like this guy here. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. Just change it as we go. I mean, another thing you could do is put a little face on him or something. All right, so here we've got our very basic frame by frame animation here. And you know, what are some other things we could do with this? So one thing we could do is we could actually add some effects to some of these layers. So if we choose our ball layer, if you notice over here, there are a number of different frame properties that we can deal with, including filters, color effects, and blend modes over here. So let's actually add, I don't know, maybe like a glow onto this or a blur. And the blurs can be useful, right? When you're trying to do motion. So if we have that motion in there, we could always change this from frame to frame, right? Or we could do something like a drop shadow. And give it sort of a, like let's put like a violet drop shadow here. Change the angle so that it's kind of going behind, right? So lots and lots of stuff that you can do to even make this a little bit more interesting, depending upon how you're trying to do stuff. So yeah, he's looking okay though. Again, very, very simple. This whole series that I'm doing on Animate basics, like this one is Animate Introductory Concepts frame by frame. So next time I think we're going to do shape tweens, then we're going to do like motion tweens, classic tweens, just to build up a foundation of, you know, common ways of animating in Animate. Again, this is not a way that I usually animate because I'm not a traditional animator. I'm more of a motion design type person, but I do I do appreciate those who have the patience to do stuff like this. So yeah. Oh, hey Annika, how are you? Everyone, you may want to click on Annika's profile right there. If you click on that, you can go to her Behance profile and you can subscribe. She does streams as well. And yes, I am doing well. Thank you. Today's gonna be a busy day. I've got a lot of extra meetings on top of classes and office hours and stuff like that. So surprisingly, I mean, this is kind of what I wanted to show today, was just this, you know? So it's very short. It's only been 25 minutes in the stream so far. Yeah, that's fine. One of the great things about Behance, of course, and doing these live streams, in case people don't know, is you can always watch the replay as long as the streamer does not hide it. And I don't hide any of mine, so they're all available. Usually available an hour or two after the stream ends. So, you know what I think I'm gonna do is actually kind of color stuff in here. It's black and white right now. We do have more time. So now that I've got the basic animation down, let's go ahead and color things in. So making sure my ground layer is selected. You can see I've got my little doodad there, right? My ground plane. So let's go ahead and, I don't know, put some more lines in here. It's very simple. Ooh, hey, I've got a auto keyframe on still, which is going to automatically insert keyframes, which is not what we want. I just want some lines, something like that, to just kind of get things a little more grounded here. And I also want to go ahead and start filling stuff in. So let's add an additional layer to my layer stack, and I'm just going to name this color, and we'll lock that ground layer so that I can be sure I'm only working inside of my color layer, right? So with my fluid brush still selected, well, I mean, or you could always use something like the classic brush tool too. It's a bit simpler. So if you're not used to using you know, stuff like the fluid brush and having those dynamics, this is a bit simpler, and it might actually be better for coloring things in. So let's color the ground a nice grassy green. You can see as I change my size here, we get a preview in the middle of the stage as to how large that actually is going to be. And I think my paint mode is a bit off. Let's see here. Yeah, my brush mode is on paint fills only. So if you have, so these brush modes are pretty cool. I go over some of the new brush modes in my new features course that was just updated on LinkedIn Learning. So have that a look if you have a subscription. But we're gonna kind of use a different brush mode from that. We're gonna just do paint normal. But you've got some choices: paint fills only, paint behind, paint selection, paint inside. A lot of these are made for things like shading, right? So paint fills only would be great if you already have a fill and you're just like shading that content in. All right, so let's see. That's nice and big, you can see. So let's go ahead and just use my classic brush tool to just kind of fill in this content right here. And there we go. So now if we go ahead and play this back, we can see that it's got a lot more color than it did previously. Hello, Reverb Mike. How are you? So let's actually check out that new brush mode. I'm gonna have a darker brush color here, and I'm gonna choose paint fills only. So what that's gonna do is if I paint up here, because there's no fills there, it's just the stage. It didn't save it. Here, let's go back. So this is a little bug. There we go. So if we do paint fills only, and we're not actually painting over a fill, what happens is it's just not going to take, right? It's just not. However, if we paint down here, right? And there we go. It's painting over only the fills that we have down below here. So maybe I just want to something like that. Make it a little, give it a little more dimension, right? So we also probably want to paint the ball. We want to paint the sky a little bit, give it some more dimension. I kind of prefer using the newer brush, the fluid brush here. So let's go back to the fluid brush and pick a nice light blue color. That's pretty big. Yeah. Oh, like creeping over there. All right, so we can go ahead and do that. Now notice here, we can choose paint fills only with the fluid brush as well. Take that brush down and let's lighten, make a lighter version and a grayer version of that blue. And then we can sort of paint and kind of shade in these other items here. So let's give it another peek. And you know, I mean, if we wanted our document, if we wanted the sky to be a different color, right? Exactly, happy little clouds. They're kind of big though. Big clouds. Big fat clouds. There we go. And actually, you know, I almost want to see this guy show up a little bit sooner. So let's go ahead and add in a keyframe there. And I'm going to have to adjust this again. And again, I've got this preset, save presets here. So let's turn on my onion scanning so I can see. So he shows up there. And we've got paint fills only. Again, I got to change it to paint normal. And there we go. Now he kind of comes in and he's a little big. Now, because he's so big, right, I can always select and do a transform on there. Make it more appropriate to the size. And even move him over a little. I always like to see the effect of onion skinning as I scrub. It always looks pretty cool. Yeah, it does kind of look like a frisbee. It's supposed to be a ball though. But what we can do, of course, is fill it in, right? So maybe I'll choose something like this. Let's turn off onion skinning. We don't need that right now. And we can see this item here. I'm going to choose my fluid brush again. And let's see. For this, make sure it paint normal. And I mean, I could just keep it black, right? Oh, no, stop it. Wrong layer, buddy. So yeah, using the fluid brush, I can always just paint it in, fill it in as black. It might look a little better in terms of what we've got going on here. Now, interesting thing about the fluid brush inside of Animate, it actually uses the same kind of technology and brushing as Adobe Fresco does. So fluid brush, underlying tech is the same stuff, as I understand it, as when you're doing vector drawing inside of Fresco. And that's why there's some limitations on it, right? It's a GPU accelerated brush. And yeah, so I'm really glad I have my stylus for this, because when you're drawing, especially frame by frame, it's really hard to do on a touchpad, which is what I usually use for stuff. or, you know, if you prefer a mouse, it's difficult. I mean, it's even difficult with this sort of thing. So this is, again, an Intuos. And it's an older Intuos. So it's an Intuos 4. But, yeah, I mean, they've got so many different displays now that have, you know, a stylus with them. I mean, if you use something like your iPad, you know, you can use a pencil or a pencil 2, depending upon the version. And those work great. You can always use, if you're on a Mac, you can use Sidecar with your iPad, and then you can draw inside of Animate right on the screen, which is nice if you don't have a separate integrated display and all that. But I don't have a display I can write on aside from my iPad, so I just use the trusty old Intuos tablet and stylus for this sort of thing. Hey Laura, how are you? I hope you're well. Thanks for popping in. How's everything been going for you? We're almost filled in here. Look at that. And this guy, he's off screen, so it's like, I don't even need these frames here, so let's just get rid of them. I'm gonna just select those frames, right click and choose to remove frames, and then they're gone. Bye-bye. Let's turn onion skinning on. Yeah, so very, very simple, but I'm not a character animator, so it's not, this isn't a type of animation that I usually do. Oh, that's cool. So Laura has done a couple tests for streaming, which is awesome. So I was doing some stuff with Adobe Max last week. We had some kind of networking brain date events, and Laura popped into one of them. Ooh, look at that. I got a little something here. Yeah, and we had a discussion. There were a couple of us. So that's great to hear that. Oops, it keeps on wanting to write in my dust layer. I don't know why. There we go. Let's fill that in. Yeah, but hey. So did your tests did your test streams work out okay, Laura? It's sometimes, I know, quite variable. So, yeah, I mean, there's not much else I can do to this. It's meant to be very simple. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've been trying to show when I demonstrate Adobe Animate like this lately is I really want to show how simple the use of Animate is, right? A lot of people, a lot of educators are weary of Animate, right? And it probably stems from, you know, its previous incarnation as Flash Professional, right? People were using that to do all sorts of crazy stuff. Apart from animation, they were using it to build applications. There were, you know, just so many different things that people did with the software and the platforms that it targeted. Just amazing stuff, really. But it's intimidating stuff too, right? Because not a lot of people know how to, you know, program a full application for a mobile device or anything like that. So people are intimidated with Animate, especially educators being a bit timid in terms of adopting it as a tool for their students. Whether you're talking K-12 or my area, which is higher education, people get like a little freaked out. But yeah, I want to kind of demonstrate that, you know, using Animate can be simple. It can be very accessible. Yeah, it's just, I want to get that message out there to people, especially in the education space. So that is part of why I'm doing this November thing here. Actually, let's bring that up before we call it quits. I'm gonna switch over to my my little touchpad here. Makes it really easy to switch between. I just put my little touchpad on top of my Intuos, and then I can just use it really easily. And if I need to use my Intuos, then I just move the touchpad off. It's kind of a nice little system I have going here. At least I'm pretty happy about it. So I want to get into my profile. So let's go into that and bring it over here. So yeah, so if you go to my profile and you want to see exactly what's coming up, you can always go to this schedule right here. So click on the schedule and you can see here's today. So we're doing frame by frame concepts in Animate. Next week on the 10th, we're going to do shape tweens, and then classic tweens, and then motion tweens. So yeah, that's the plan for this whole month of November. It's going to be Adobe Animate Introductory Concepts month for me. So cool. If you're interested in any of that stuff, be sure to check it out in the coming weeks. All right, well, I think I'm going to end it there. Nice to see you all. Thanks for joining. So yeah, Annika, Reverb Mike, Laura. Yeah. Nice turnout with people that I know. So that's great. Anybody else who's on here, because I know there are a lot of people on here, you know, feel free to always chat, because that's part of this whole experience, right? Is to be social about it. At least that's what I try to do. Yeah. So yeah, 8 a.m. Pacific. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I heard yesterday that we were just about in the time change. Everybody hates that. I hate it. I don't know why we have to do that. And it's funny because like every time it happens, you know, people complain about it. There's news stories about it. You know, different politicians will make a big stink about it, like we need to change this, and then of course everybody forgets about it until 6 months later when the cycle repeats itself. So yeah, Reverb Mike, we pretty much used the old Flash website for at least 15 years. Time for a change. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, that's something I like to show in, I've got a user interface design class that I teach at the university, and like the first week we kind of look at historical interface designs on the web. We use things like archive.org to look back, and you know, I like to show kind of archive versions of old Flash-based websites, because it definitely was an interesting time just having websites built inside of Flash Player, having them out there. People did some real cool stuff, and yeah, I mean, it was very different from the web we have today. Right. But anyway, we could talk about that forever. So I'm going to wrap the stream up. Thanks again, Reverb Mike, Laura, and Annika. I'll see you around, and hope everyone else on the stream also has a nice week ahead of them, and nice rest of your day. So